in. I've got some weird stuff on going on. Oh, there we go. It's cleared up. How's everybody doing out there? Frederick Rogers in the house. Ben Allmark in the house. Blues fan 63 in the house. Howdy, folks, to you too. Hope you guys are doing well. While we're waiting for more people to join in with us, I'll start out by saying, as I usually do, that I really greatly appreciate you spending your time with watching the live stream. Time is a valuable asset, and spending a little bit of yours with me is greatly appreciated. It shows great support that I do appreciate a lot. So, thank you very much. Whether you're watching this live now or in the rerun, thank you so much for doing so. And I guess I could start out by saying if you haven't subscribed and you like what's coming up here, there's plenty more. Why don't you hit the subscription button and sign up with us? We'd love to have you join this ever growing community we have going here. Fantastic group of people that I am so happy to see tonight. Mr. Watson in the house. Greetings. Hey, hey, hey. Yeah, guys. So this week, interestingly enough, Denver in the house, Northern Thrifter in the house. Welcome, welcome. From all over the world, man. Fantastic. Awesome. So great to have you guys here. Yeah, interestingly enough, the recent Squire refurbished guitar that I did, the white one that took forever to get done, that one actually sold. It's gone. It's being actually interesting enough used as a display piece in a shop. Interesting enough. Sun Base, hey man, it's been a long time. Welcome to the live stream again, sir. I thank you so much for taking the time to join in with us tonight. It's good to have you here. Yeah, so that one win. I'm very pleased with that. It's a beautiful guitar, and maybe somebody may see it and buy it. I don't know, but it's a beauty, and it was well worth taking the time to refurbish like that. So I'm quite pleased. It's not true that things aren't moving out there, but you really have to be very creative in how you make things happen. So this is a little bit of that. Believe me, I'm thankful for it. So that happened. I am in the process of gear hunting again. I'm on another guitar safari, and I have some interesting things lined up. I actually, guys, I might actually have my first lawsuit guitar come through, in Ibanez, and you know, the so-called lawsuit guitars were guitars that were made in Japan. As I said, these guys took a lot of the original guitars, or whenever a model came out, for example, a 70s Les Paul Custom. They would fly over from Japan to the States, buy one, bring it back, and they would completely dissect it. What was used, everything, to the exact measurements, and then translate those measurements, of course, over to the metric system. And in some cases, in most cases, there are some, of course, guitars like these lawsuit guitars that did not. I mean, they didn't make, and they made them exactly so. They copied them to the T, so much so that the companies began in the states began to file lawsuits against these Japanese firms. Well, as it turns out, in the end, the lawsuits kind of fell through. Nothing really came of that, to be honest. It's not like something went to court and something happened because of that. No, actually, what the American guitar makers decided to do, they said, hey, you know what? These Japanese cats are making these guitars pretty nice. So why don't we sign an official contract with them and have them do it on the legit with us? And that's how it went. And as Picard would say, make it so. And it was so. And but these Ibanez's from around the mid 77 to 1980 are considered to be the true, the ones that were called into question by American manufacturers. And I may have found one in its original case. That's the amazing thing about it. I found one in its original case from 1980. So we shall see. I have my fingers crossed on that. Feelers out on it. Of course, it's sight unseen. It's in Japan. So it's never left Japan. It's always been in Japan. And that's also another cool thing about it. But we shall see. But, it got me thinking that, everybody's got a vice. Everybody's got a vice. There's that Prince used to say, everybody's got a vice. Mine is the opposite of ice. Mine is the running hot water, the daughter of morality. Man, that guy could write some lyrics. But everybody's got a vice. Tobacco, drinking, tea, whatever, you know, and a lot of them are deadly. You know, smoking obviously is not really the way to go. Though amazingly enough, the cancer rates in Cuba are very low, and they smoke the product of their one of their biggest products is their cigars, and they smoke them themselves, of course. And the cancer rates are low there, so maybe there's something else going on there. Anyway, I digress. But anyway, there are unhealthy vices, and there are the vice that we have that we share, and that's buying guitars. It can be a vice. It won't kill you. And unlike those other vices, it's a vice that can be sold on to somebody else who has the same vice. Well, I don't know. Maybe by definition, there may be some things that are similar. But anyway, well, the point of this discussion, we'll stick with that. And so, I'm not going to, begrudge a man who has a vice buying guitars. Like I said, you can have one or you can have 500. It makes no difference to me. I'm not going to be one of those pointing and wagging my finger at you kind of guys. Um, because that's not the point of that. At least they have a home. I'm looking at the fact, well, okay, those 500 have a home. There's like 50 million out there that don't, and they're producing more and more every day. So good on you if you have a collection, in my opinion, for that very reason. However, I it was raised up in a live stream previously. The the talk about tone woods came up, and I alluded to a video that I had done when I was living in Singapore. That was kind of my comic take on tone woods. You can find that on my channel. Just look up Upstairs to the Right Music channel, tone woods. You'll find the video. It's pretty funny. It's actually hilarious, but it has held up. And there is there's a couple of thoughts here, guys. You're gonna have to bear with me tonight. I'm free balling it kind of in a way, but there's a couple of things that come into my mind when I talk about tone woods, which is tonight's discussion. Another tone talk, so let's talk wood. Because it was mentioned in a live stream, and there are a lot of people out there that have not heard my spiel on tone woods, my serious one, and my thoughts on it. And as a topic of discussion as a YouTuber, YouTube within this lane, the guitar reviewer or discussion group, can sometimes sound like an echo chamber. You know, of course, when a new product is released, that happens because a lot of YouTubers, well, used to. I don't know how that goes anymore. I was never part of that gang. But as soon as a new piece would come out, of course, everybody would be reviewing it. So it became kind of an echo chamber in that way. There's a lot of thoughts and concepts that somebody will bring up, and it's oddly enough, there are others that will echo that same thought within the same week. It gets to be a kind of a weird echo chamber, and the talk of tone woods has been done to death. There have been guys who have gone to extreme lengths to prove their reasons why they think tone wood is a thing to those guys, on the other hand, who say that it is not. There's guys who've taken stone and put pickups in it and strung it up and played it and said, hey, this sounds no different than something made from wood. They've used all kinds of materials all over YouTube. A lot of guys have done that work. And those would be, of course, on this side of it, of the argument. These the guys who say that it doesn't matter, you know. And then on YouTube, you'll have the guys on this end who will say to you, well, you'll have manufacturers from Gibson. So a guy doing a Northern Thrifter. I know I'm biased with the wood thing because I have no experience with vintage or old guitars. I do, which is why I'll get into my thoughts. Like I said, if you watch that video I did on Tonewood, my thoughts will be very clear. But it's not so much about my thoughts tonight. I wanted to kind of change it, and make it a little bit different, and just go on the logic of things. I want to look at this from a logic standpoint, if possible. Kind of, again, looking at something from 30,000 feet, as I like to say. But in the YouTube echo chamber on this side, guys, manufacturers. I saw a Gibson, the Gibson custom shop. Guy brings down a piece of wood and he starts tapping on it, and he says, "Okay, well, I would pair this is a certain something," and this guy, he handles a lot of wood. I don't know if I'm going to get through this conversation without giggling a couple of times tonight. But he seems to have an idea of his craft, let's put it that way. And yeah, I would pair it, he says, with this particular neck because, tonally it's going to make X, Y, and Z. And of course, Paul Reed Smith from PRS Guitars is famous for talking about tone woods. So you get a lot of different manufacturers, a lot of different cats who will talk about, tone woods and on this end of the spectrum as well. That you have to respect in a way because, again, you would think that. See, I can't, I can't say it's the people who deal with a lot of wood. Yeah, we're gonna have to find another way of phrasing this tonight. You would think that guys like that would inspect their hardwoods. Look, you guys stop. I'm trying to do a serious show here tonight. Stop. Yeah, you would think guys like that, you can respect their opinion, obviously. You want to, because that's their job, that's their thing. But then, you start looking at it from a logic process. And again, you realize, yes, it is their job. But again, their job is manufacturing, selling something they want you to buy. So they will tell you they're biased. There's a bias there. Michael Watson cracking up. Yeah, me too. This is going to be a hard one to get through tonight. But there's a bias there. They know good wood when they feel something. Yeah, man. You would think that you could trust these guys, but there's an obvious bias there because they're trying to sell you something. Paul Reed Smith's trying to sell you something. The Gibson guy, custom shop guy, is trying to sell you something. That's what she said. And yeah, this is really going to be a great show tonight, guys. But again, you start applying logic to it, and again, you see their biases, and their biases become revealed. So I want to talk about it tonight because it's an interesting topic. You can never really talk about this enough, honestly. Especially now, I'm not talking about acoustic guitars. I'm talking about solid body guitars, electrics. Acoustic guitars, I that is a completely different discussion with a completely different viewpoint on, believe it or not, for an obvious reason. But the first thing that you would look at as to, okay, electric guitar, what is that chain, that signal chain that it goes through in order to create a sound? Well, there is the pickups. because it doesn't matter if it's 100,000-year-old African mahogany or not. If it doesn't have any pickups, it's not. It's a piece of furniture. Okay, so logically, logically, and we talked about that here on this channel. It's going to be your pickups, and your pickups. Your mic, as the British say, these microphones, and I like that term. That's actually the British term of microphones for these is very accurate. I like that term because it really is what it is. If you look at it and call it what it is, then it makes sense to you. Pickups, okay, okay, we kind of know what that is, but if I would ask a person on the street what's a guitar pickup, I doubt they would know what that means. But if I would say to them what's a microphone, everybody would know what that means. Well, these are microphones. So I like that terminology. So let's stick with that. Let's keep that one. And obviously, whether you're talking about, whether you're talking about, well, that didn't really help my case there. Grab this one. Whether you're talking about single coil or humbuckers, either way, in this equation, you're talking about your main input. You're talking about the main thing, the first thing that sound that's created from the vibration of those strings, which, by the way, is the second thing on this list. Your strings actually will have more effect in terms of that output sound again than the tone woods. And in this case, it's because the gauge of the strings. We know that nines and tens and 11s and 12s do have a different tonality to them because the way they vibrate it. They vibrate in connection with the magnet. So number two on that list, the other thing that you would look at in terms of what would logically influence tone would be strings. And we've talked about strings, and uh, I play around with strings. I've gotten to be a little bit more thrifty in my old age. I order custom wound sets from the UK, as you guys know, um, that are based upon something that over a long time that I've determined is what I like to play with and what makes it work for me. Fortunately, these Primo Slinkies are extremely close to what it is that I'm doing with that custom one, and I can get them done. It's about the same price. Uh, there is the VAT, however, that's the thing that makes the difference because I order from the UK. But strings are the second thing on the list to my mind because they do influence your tone and also the way that you play as well, which also is one of the biggest influence over your tone is the way that you play. You can put Eric Clapton on any style of guitar and he's always going to sound like Eric Clapton. And then the last part of that chain, Blues Fan 63, strings, thin or thick pick or fingers. Yeah, yeah, yeah. The other things. Sunbase, PRs recently resigned the tuner buttons because, as Paul said, these new buttons help to open up the vowel sound of the guitar. The vowel sound of the guitar? I think sometimes he's a little over the top in his opinion. Well, that's more marketing talk. The vowel sound of the guitar. Was it A-E-I-O-U? Is it a Japanese vowel? Kaki kuke ko? Sasise so? Boy, that's a hard one to pronounce late at night. The vowel sound of the guitar. Again, it's snake oil. Yeah, thank you, Northern Fifter. That's correct, snake oil. I don't know how Paul Reed. Speaking of Paul Reed Smith, man, I don't know how that cat can be so strong on tone woods when he's producing guitars out of Indonesia that are poly. Which we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about a paint here. We're going to get into that. So things that make you go, if it's so important, so are you saying that those are inferior? So why are you selling them if they're not the thing? Again, We use logic. And you can sometimes use their own logic against them because it frankly doesn't really hold up. It doesn't really hold up very well when you start scrutinizing, especially in the long run. Um, but let's talk about wood. So we've talked about, I'm sorry, and amps. I didn't get to the third one. Your amp. Um, your amp is super important. Let's get back to the guitar pickups. You put a good, decent set of pickups in a cheap guitar, and they'll sound good. They'll sound even better if it's going through a good amp. So all the parts of that equation are come to the sum of a whole. But the amp, or whatever, if you're using, a Helix or you're using, whatever, as your output, is going to be determined also in terms of the end equation. Pickup, strings, amp. I haven't talked about wood yet because the wood of the guitar is not going to make a cheap amp sound good. But a good set of pickups will. Seamus O'Brien in the house. Welcome, Seamus. Welcome. I'm so glad to have you here. Thank you so much for showing up. I think the Nitro PRCs also has a poly mix. Yeah. So I don't get it, man. I've got that here on my list. You know, I've got it on my list here. Let me clear some of this stuff out of the way. I'm glad that I have props. I'm like a Japanese TV show. I got plenty of props. Fretboards. Let's talk about fretboards. Now, there's rosewood, there's ebony, palfero, and Indian laurel, essentially. And um, so now we'll talk about wood. So with all of these different types of fretboard material that you can get, um, they are to the comfort of the player more than to any kind of opening up any vowel sounds. They're more to a preference kind of thing. They're not to an issue of tonality at all, in my opinion. I like rosewood. One of the reasons why I really dig and why I won't touch any guitar that's less than 20, years old is because 20 years ago you could get a good decent bit of rosewood. 30 years ago, 40 years ago, you could get some excellent bits of rosewood. Excellent bits. And again, like I said, keep in mind in the back of your mind when we talk about this tonight, if you're new to this discussion, we've had it before, but I will also bring up the point that again, woods have grades to them. There's different grades amongst wood, and each one of those grades of that wood has a price to it as well. And that's always going to be an issue with manufacturers to try to go to the lowest common denominator in terms of overall price because it goes to margin, points to margin. So, but however, that it can be said that in years past, they would go all the way and buy a little bit higher quality rosewood or a little bit better quality ebony, and do it anyway. They'd make reductions in other places because they wanted to have that as a featured part of their guitar. Now you have these substitutes, Paul Ferro, Indian Laurel, and I think we've all kind of gotten used to them, you know, and some actually have said that I find it to be a preference over, and most of us shake our heads and like, really? Because I myself, I like rosewood. I prefer rosewood over ebony. You know, I do. I would, which is what I would, which was one of the reasons why I would prefer to have a custom with a rosewood instead of an ebony. But it's not really the combination. But the combination there was not an issue of tone. It was an issue again of materials that fit the design build of what they were putting together. And what do I mean? Seamus O'Brien, the difference between tone woods. Yeah. Anthony's in the house. I didn't see you there, Anthony. Sorry, you were stuck between comments. Greetings, Anthony. How you been? I hope you've been fine. I hope you've been fine. I hope you all have been fine. I really do. Siggy Sours in the house. Welcome. Custom with rosewood. Get in Oroville then, bro. Yeah. Well, yeah. The Japanese were doing it, which is probably why I have a preference for it, because those are the guitars that I kind of went through when I lived in Japan, cumulatively for 18 years. And so, which is a long time. And so, but I just have a love for rosewood. I've had some really great examples of rosewood, and I've had some terrible ones. I got a Les Paul Studio Epiphone, and it was documented on this channel, that had the worst rosewood fretboard with the worst streaking I've ever seen in my life. And it seemed like towards the end, when they started making that transition over to Indian Laurel, that the quality of the rosewood really just started going to the bottom of the barrel. So again, but these are all visual aspects. These are design issues. These are not per se into comfort, also to the player. I mean, it's a preference, visual and preference. Northern Thrifter. I have an Indonesian Benton with a Purple Heart Amaranth, and it feels just beautiful. I really like it. I got one right here behind me. I've got a Harley Benton, the SC Custom, with the same Purple Heart fretboard on it, and I have to say that it's smooth. It has a smooth texture to it. It's hard, um, and it's playable for me. I used it for recording, so obviously I found it sufficient, as my grandmother used to say. Uh, but would prefer rosewood. I really would. If I could tear out that and put in rosewood, believe me, I would. And then that guitar, in my opinion, would be perfect. So, yeah, so we've covered fretboard material. Next, let's talk about neck material. So, here I have California maple, California roasted maple neck. And what can I say? You know, whether it's mahogany neck, whether it's a maple neck, whether it's, oh my gosh, there are a couple of different materials they're using. I didn't write that down. I meant to do a little bit of research on that, but there are so many other materials that they're using these days to make necks. And most of those are done, well, with the exception of custom shop and custom order and small luthiers, are done to keep costs low. Again, that overriding issue of cost, guys. You know, again, Paul Reed Smith, that's just perfect with that stupid, vowel like sound. Let's cut through all that and let's just talk about the realities of what it is. And it's about cost cutting. And so now this is a California maple neck. It's been completely done in poly, so it's a gloss on it, as you can see. But and the grain, that blackened grain there, is not actually real. My understanding is that there's ways that they do in order to stain it, in order to create that, and then they do what they do. But that doesn't take away from the quality of this. It's actually quite a quality neck. It's actually really nice. But again, certain things were done to it in order for a cosmetic issue. It had nothing to do with anything in terms of the tone of it. And again, you can swap necks, and you can say that it changed the tone of your guitar when you swap the neck, but I don't think so. Walnut, yeah, that's another one. Thank you, Frederick. Thank you so much. Yeah, walnut. I had a guitar that had a walnut neck. Again, all this stuff is done in 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 mental terms of the cost to the manufacturers. Yeah, mahogany is the same thing too. You know, a mahogany neck versus a maple neck on, one of the things about the Les Paul traditional, is that what it is? A tribute, I'm sorry, is that it has a maple neck and a mahogany body. Now, does a tribute sound any less than a Les Paul classic or a Les Paul standard in that regard if you put the same pickups in it that the other two mentioned guitars had? No. I've actually, kind of indirectly done that experiment, and I can tell you no. That difference of a neck is something that I don't like because I just want a mahogany neck. I prefer a mahogany neck. Again, it goes to preference, and I think that's the thing too. But most people don't care, you know, mahogany or maple, whatever. And you won't hear anybody saying that unless that there's a difference in tone there. If you were to put the exact same pickups in a Les Paul standard, for example, into that tribute, you know. Seamus O'Brien, Mike, is there any truth that a lot of Japanese guitars in the 1970s were made from reused lumber from Japanese bowling alleys? I heard that over the years in collecting circles. Boy, I wish I had it here next to me. Or the other one, the Squires. The Squires, both of those Squires were made in 2001 and 2003, respectively, from the same factory. And there have been rumors floating out there for years that those maple necks, which are extremely great, by the way, you're not going to find a maple neck good like that on anything past 2010, in my opinion, 2015. But those early 2000 necks are supposed to be the same story, that they were from reclaimed wood. So this reclaimed wood story gets floated around a lot. And to hear you bring up a Japanese version of that story as opposed to the usual Chinese one leads me to believe that there may be a small whiff of shite on it. We talked about that. And I think so as well. I've kind of trumpeted that a little bit myself, but the more I've thought about it, again, if we apply a logic to that, and again, if you're hearing that with Japanese guitars, then no. No, in the case of Japan, I can tell you that after the war, they planted a lot of trees. And if you go from 1947, 20 years when a tree is mature enough to begin using, that puts you up to the mid 60s, which is when they first started producing guitars. It's also an offshoot of the fact that they were making Singer sewing machines. If anybody is old enough to had a mom or auntie or a grandma that had a Singer sewing machine that had the wood furniture that was connected to it, and it all folded up into a cabinet, and that is what the Japanese were producing when that kind of became not a thing to have in the household anymore. It kind of went obsolete. How many people do you know now have a sewing machine in their house? I used to have one when I was a kid. I don't have one now. Why is that? I know how to use a sewing machine too, but I don't have one. Dig that. But they had to transition with that wood into something else, and it was guitars. Suki Sour, I have a US Squire, bro. Awesome. Suki Sour, next seems more Japanese made to me. Yeah, that is quite true. Again, between Fender USA when they closed down their Corona plant and they were moving to their new location, a lot of the stuff that was made in the United States went over to Japan and vice versa. There was a lot of weird stuff that goes on in these markets. Nothing is clear. There's nothing that, people keep better records now, but even up until the 1990s, the records are a little bit foggy. But yeah, that's a true thing. So yes, I believe that. It could be a Japanese neck. You don't know. My grandma had one. Yeah, yeah. So again, they had to transition out of that, and it was guitars. Let's talk about bodies. One of the most common woods used in guitar bodies, regardless of price, regardless of price, there's $3,000 guitars that contain this wood, and there are $300 guitars that contain this wood. And let's apply logic just to that statement alone, without saying what the wood is. You would have to say to yourself, well, okay, economics being an issue, how could a maker of a $300 guitar be able to fit in his margins that would be appropriate for a $3,000 guitar, assuming that there was value to be had there in the wood? And that all gets thrown out of the window when you find out the wood that I'm talking about is basswood. Basswood is a very common wood. Fender Japan, on most of their models, use basswood. I hate basswood. There are $3,000 plus uh, guitars out there. Gosh, what is that? BC Rich. Anyway, that's using basswood. So there's no value really there in the wood. There's nothing there tone wise. I hate basswood because it's soft. It's soft and it damages. If you bump a basswood guitar, then you got a dent. If you bump a mahogany guitar, you may get away with it. It may be all right. I'm talking about not as like that. I'm talking about just a casual. Oh, I was picking this up and it bumped, the edge. In basswood, that'll leave a mark. It's one of the reasons I hate it. I hate basswood, because it's just so soft and it shows every mark. And again, it's not a tone thing there. You know, it's not really anything other than financial greed on one end of that spectrum and necessity on the other. It's a very accessible wood. Sig Sauer, I'm 90% sure my US Squire is basswood, but just guessing. It's possible. It's possible. Again, a lot of guitars out there use basswood. It's one of the most popular, well used woods out there. And now, when we're talking about tone, does that really play? Let's use logic here. Again, we're looking at this logically tonight. We're discussing this logically. Does that make any sense? Doesn't make sense to me if we're talking about it from a tone issue. Sun base. I don't like basswood. It doesn't seem to hold screws good, especially the end grain where the strap was. Yes, that's the other problem is you'll notice that on a lot of those Japanese guitars, that is an issue. You always find them and the strap button's always out. And when you try to put a new one, it's because the hole is stripped. And you got to fill that hole back in again, usually with epoxy or something. Let that dry and then redo the hole and put it back in again. But yeah, because it's basswood. 6 hour. I'm a famous hero. You will be soon. Low. Hey man, the eye. Prince used to say, "The eye of the mind makes a movie." And I'm sorry, not Prince. I'm sorry, the Joker. I'm sorry because I keep thinking of the Bad Dance video, and it gets my mind a little confused. But the Joker in the original Batman movie said, "The eye of the mind makes a movie." What he meant by that is what you perceive and what you see to be is what is. And that's a really deep, deep, deep concept because one reality may not be be the same as another's in that kind of situation, yet all joined together in some odd kind of way. So, yeah, dream on. But basswood, I don't like it. It's too soft. Agathis, is that what it is? Agathis is another common wood. My other Squire SC100 from 2003 is made from that. That's a hardwood. You could take that thing and drop it from, the top of the Sears Tower. By the time it hit the ground, I would worry about the concrete, not the guitar. That's a tough wood. That's a hard wood. That's harder than mahogany. And a lot of people shy away from that one because of its weight. They'll tell you old guitars that are made from that are super, super heavy. Well, that is the one of the lightest. That Squire from 2003 is one of the lightest guitars that I've ever had in terms of a Strat that I've held. It's super light. It's one of the things that I was like, wow, this is awesome. Both Fern and I were quite impressed with the weight of it. But to go to tone, no, again, that was a financial decision. It was a cheap, like basswood. It was something that was cheap and available, so they used it. Which reminds me, again, speaking of bodies, the classic combination of a Les Paul Standard is the mahogany body with a maple cap and a mahogany neck. And those who are again on this side of the argument, those who say that tone wood matters, will tell you that that is the quintessential recipe of wood that you would need in order to get your guitar to even get in the dimensions of sounding like a Les Paul. In other words, it's not a Les Paul unless it's made of that particular combination. Oh, well, what's a Les Paul tribute then? But I digress. Um, so, interesting enough, again, applying logic, if that's true, then why in 1961, when they introduced the SG, they dropped the the maple cap and just made it mahogany? And does an SG sound any different? Does it's a Les Paul? It's a 60, before it was an SG, it was a Les Paul. It was a 61 Les Paul. They redesigned the body, much to the horror of Les Paul. But in any case, which was one of the reasons they had a falling out over that Les Paul and Gibson. But they dropped the maple cap and just made it mahogany. Didn't change the tone of it into their minds. So what's up with the maple cap? Well, the maple cap was decorative. It's a decorative thing because mahogany doesn't look as beautiful in terms of grain as a maple cap does. We've talked about this before. Maple cap is merely a decorative issue. Which is why a veneer. Say, well, it's got a veneer on it, so it's not a real, cap. Well, what difference does it make if it's a good veneer, like on those Epiphone 1959s? Especially when you buff them out a little bit on some of the really nice Epiphone Les Paul tributes. I go through the list. Hell, some of the new Harley Bentons are starting to come out with a little flame on them. Whether it's a veneer or not, it has nothing to do with the tone. It does nothing. Because if it did, why didn't they introduce the SG with a maple top, the maple cap in 1961? They dropped it because they didn't, in that redesign, they didn't need that visual aesthetic. They didn't need it. So that covers the fretboard, that covers the neck, that covers the body. Um, you know, again, a veneer in the case of a Les Paul, whether it's a veneer or it's a solid piece of maple, is again a aesthetic thing. It has nothing to do with the tone of the guitar. Seamus O'Brien. My 1984 Bernie Randy Rhodes has a solid mahogany body, no maple cap, and it sounds as much as Les Paul as my Gibson Standard. Yeah. Because they took the pickups and they voiced them to sound that way. And thus it sounds that way because its microphones are voiced or to pick up and to execute that tone. As soft as basswood is, Palawana is even softer. Yeah, I agree with that. I'm not even gonna argue that one. Stella XX, my friend Siggy Sauer is famous. Hey man, I got you. I think all you guys are famous to me because I appreciate you showing up every night and taking the time to listen to these rants and ravings on these subjects that at the end of the day they don't really amount to a hill of beans, but there's so much evil and so much destruction and mayhem out there in the world. Isn't it nice just to sit back and talk about wood? Isn't it great? Then pickups and stuff like that. I think it is. Hey, I appreciate it. You guys are amazing too, is the point of that. Because if it wasn't for you, I'd just be a guy sitting here with a bunch of fancy lights talking to a camera. And that would be kind of sad. So I appreciate you guys taking the time to do so. Yep. I don't think it's going to ever turn out that we run out of trees, but I do think we're going to continue to have less options as time progresses. Yep. I agree with that. Again, all of these machinations by these corporations, regardless of what it is, are the funnels all towards having a lack of options. There are more lack of options of things now than when I was a kid. And I could, um, the sewing machine, we talked about that. Well, that'd be a great thing to have. Save you a lot of money if you knew how to operate a sewing machine and to fix your clothes. But those options aren't really there. They've been kind of phased out. It would be smart money to start thinking about material science and not wood options. Again, there are people out there who have dedicated to study and to find alternatives. However, it is not in the prerogative of the major corporations to go that route. So they will buy those small companies out, buy their research, and put it in a vault. Take that vault, put it in a bigger vault, take that bigger vault, and throw it in the ocean. And that's the truth of it. But from a conservation standpoint, yes, I strongly believe that this overproduction of guitars is ridiculous. It's got to the point where it's clown world. We may or may not run out of trees, but boy, howdy, it takes a long time for those forests to come back. And again, the forests are the lungs of the earth. And you ever meet a guy who's operating on just one lung? Hey, that went dark quickly. It goes from light to dark here. It goes all the way around here, you'll find if you stick around long enough. But it doesn't have, again, getting back to woods, guys, just looking at this logically, a lot of this stuff doesn't hold up if you just look at it. And it doesn't. It really does not. Now let's get to the last one from my notes, which is paints. We touched upon that a little bit in the beginning about whether it's a poly or it's a nitro. This is poly. This has been sprayed with poly pretty well too. Not super thick. I've seen it worse. But this is poly. Will this make a hill of beans a difference in terms of its playability to me if it was not poly, if it was nitro? No. What do I care about? I care, are the frets well done? Yeah, here I am playing with wood on YouTube again. playing with my wood on YouTube. There's another one. The frets have to be nice. Of course, it has to be really well done. The finish work has to be well done, and the nut, of course, has to be cut correctly. This one is not. It has a little bit of overhang here, but that's all right. That's an easy thing to replace. But those are the things that I expect. I don't wonder how this is going to make the guitar sound. I really don't. It doesn't occur to my mind. It doesn't. The functionality, will it work? Will it help the guitar stay in tune? Is it of good quality? Will it snap or break on me? Is it cheap? Is it uncomfortable to play? Those are the considerations that I have and any logical person would have. So therefore I assume that most people would have. I like to hope that we're all logical out there mostly. And that would be the conclusion that you would draw too. So where in any of nitro, it doesn't matter if it's nitro or poly, that's not a consideration I was making. Oh, great! It's a nitro neck. We're kind of programmed in this genre to feel that that's a premium. Is it? Is it? It's just a different way of treating the wood of finishing the product. Some people don't like nitro. Some people prefer poly. Some people hate poly and they only go nitro. Do any of these make them any less or better guitar players? No, I don't think so. Did Hendrix give a crap that his Stratocaster at Woodstock was sprayed in poly? Probably not. I don't think that's what he was thinking about at the time. You know, again, Seamus O'Brien. The CITES issue with rosewood boards a few years ago caused a lot of problems. Yes, a few years ago, especially importing from Japan. Yeah, even now. See, these things have reverberation, even though they've kind of backtracked on that. People are still manufacturers, you know, deservedly so, about using these materials because they don't know if somebody's going to, flip on them, and then they've got a whole warehouse full of stuff that they can't move. And even though they backtracked on that again, like I said, people are getting kind of shy about it. And most consumers are accepting of Indian laurel. I am not. I'm not. Um, Especially when I know in the stratum of cost, Indian laurel is like basswood, is one of those woods that's not a very expensive wood, whereas rosewood would certainly be considered to be a more expensive wood. And I know that if I'm looking at a 16, 17, 18, $2,000 Epiphone and it has Indian laurel on the fretboard, I'm going to be asking questions. I just am. Yep. On the topic of guitar nuts, I have a nut that is 2 millimeter north of the intended scale length, bound neck, rosewood board. Am I going to explode my guitar setup guy's head or wallet if I roll in and tell him move the nut down 2 millimeters? Well, yeah, you'll have to talk to your Luther about that. But yeah, I'm sure it can be done. It depends upon and the cost involved there, as well. That with nuts, it's always a nut is a cost involvement kind of thing, you know. Dewey, welcome. How you doing, Dewey? How you feeling? You all right? Good to have you in the house. Welcome to the club. We're having a little discussion here tonight, and we're talking about wood and nuts. Now, my nut on this case needs to be replaced. So it comes down to a financial decision there, and because it's cut poorly, and I think that it may, if I were to really take a look at it, you would see that it's off center probably too. Anyway, that's a candidate for replacement, but I'm going to seriously ask, a plastic nut like this will run you about $1. A bone nut about $5. And so that really comes down to this. Thank you, Dewey. I appreciate it. It is a nice one. It's funny. So this is a Temu neck. I got this neck off of Temu when I did my little when Temu was reaching out to everybody and came across my mailbox. I said, "Let me look into this." And it just so happened that at that time I was looking for spare parts, and I said to myself, "Is this, the place to go to finally to get the spare parts I need to do what I do inexpensively?" And the answer is no. It's not. Because for me, having a little bit of skill doing this work and having a fantastic Luther when I can't do it uh, available to me down the literally 10-minute walk down the street from me, it makes it okay with these. But there's still an expense there that, like I said, this has to be done. This nut has to be refitted. And if I don't have the experience to do that, that's going to cost money. So what really did this cost me if I've got to work on it? Also, I point out again, I've got a I got my drill bits here somewhere. I've got to re-drill these holes because some of them are bigger and some of them are smaller. Again, if I'm just a regular guy and I got this, I would be disappointed because I'd have to take it to a Luther and work on it. So Temu, no, I'd have to say no. And also, interesting enough, this is no longer available on Temu. Yeah, they don't sell these anymore, and I don't know why that was, but this was kind of one of those get it while you can kind of things. But I don't find Temu to be a great place for people to get parts. There's no substituting. You have to go to All Parts. You've got to go to Stewie Mac. You've got to go to the usual suspects, Stratosphere, places like that if you want to get parts, because you can get them in the mail and you can immediately go to work with them. You don't have to work on them when they come in, like this stuff. So there's that. So Nitro Poly, PRS is producing poly guitars. They're producing nitro guitars with a possible poly mix in it. There's a poly mix in Gibsons standards USA models. They put in it. Take a look at that. There's a poly in that nitro mix. Of course, it's one of the anyway. Again, it's not something that points towards tone. This entire discussion tonight has just been a logical look at the things that people throw out there to make you believe that tone wood makes a difference over your pickups, your string, and your amp. You know, and if you've played long enough and you've been around long enough, you know this. But for the uninitiated and the casual observer, you can believe that vowel crap that Paul Reed Smith was as was described there earlier. You can fall for that kind of marketing gibberish. I'm curious how the old school oiled neck has sort of gone away. Yeah, I just the guitar, one of the guitars that I just refurbished, that just sold. I did a oil and wax finish on the neck, and it's lovely. So much. It's the first time I did it. First time I did a finish like that. So much so that that is the only type of neck finish that I'm going to do from now on. Fern, my luthier, a local luthier that I deal with, he loved it. He said, "This is really fantastic work." Every time he sees it, "This lovely neck you did," and it really is lovely. And why has that gone away? Because there's extra work that's involved in that. There's extra. There's a little bit of extra that people aren't willing to again figure into their margins. Tongue oil, true oil, Danish wax, that stuff looks great and feels great. Yeah, man. Yeah, yeah. It feels great. That neck feels great. If this wasn't so sploshed and poly, I would do this. I would prefer that this came undone, but it's all right. It'll do for its purposes. But from now on, going ahead, that is the route that I'm going. That is a wonder. And if I had a body And instead of doing a paint job on it, if it was just a plain body, I would do that kind of finish on it as well. A natural finish. It's just lovely. It really is. It feels good too. And after time, that wax and that tongue oil, they start doing their thing, and it's something to feel. But again, none of this points towards the tone of those guitars. It's always in the pickups. Don't like the pickups, like I said, adjust the height on them first and see if the heights need adjustment. You know. Yep, yep, yeah, agreed. None of these things have anything, none of these wood issues or wood discussion that I've had tonight, talking on the different parts that you would find on a guitar that are made of wood, have anything to do with the tone of the guitar. They don't. And you're not going to convince me otherwise. I'm sorry. Because again, we've broken it down from the neck to the body, to the paint, the fretboard materials, and it all gets back to the pickups, the strings, and the amp. A Harley Benton guitar is great if you have a great amp. You got a Fender Blues Junior, a nice one, or if you got a good Marshall, you got a decent Laney, you got a decent whatever, depending upon your budget, then that Harley Benton will sing. Everybody will be like, "Holy crap, man, that Harley Benton sounds great." Well, yeah, it's because it's plugged into this really nice amp and it has decent pickups. So then there again, those things aren't really known for having the magic elixir of mahogany, maple, and rosewood in most of them, and yet you can make it work. Sunbase. Have to leave. We'll catch up the last part later on YouTube. Take it easy. Yeah, so you have a good day. Keep safe out there. And thank you for tuning in. I appreciate it, really. Be safe. Have a good one. But again, none of these things have amount to a hill of beans when it comes to the tone of that guitar. Now, um, the density of the woods, does that have anything to do with an effect on the output of the magnets? No. Again, like I said, that's all above board, and you can raise or adjust the pickup or the pole pieces individually. I do it all the time. I stagger my pole pieces. You just take a screwdriver and go down the line and stagger them. Some are all the way in. Some of them are two or three turns up, depending upon. So those are adjustments that you're making there. The density, whether it was a heavy guitar, whether it was a light guitar, whether it was pine, whether it was basswood, whether it was mahogany, it didn't make a difference in that regard. And the last thing in the equation, again, that really makes a difference in terms of tone is really this right here, you as a player. So stop worrying about the tone wood, is the takeaway from this one. Be more concerned about your playing, your practicing, and your own tone. Hell, maybe your tone is just a cheap guitar, and a cheap amp. Maybe that's your tone. Hell, there's plenty of cats who've made it, with far less or the same. So just something I threw out there to consider because we should be more interested in the music than the woods. Those things don't matter. You think again, like I said, cats didn't have big guitar collections, and they didn't give two kitties for what the wood of the guitar was. They dug the way it looked. Again, visual, big part of it. They liked the way it felt. Again, an individual preference. And then, of course, when they plugged it in, they liked the way they sound because they liked the pickups that were in it. I'm sure there's been a many cat who picked up a guitar that looked beautiful, plugged it in, it sounded like crap, and they said, "Thank you, no." Or, "Okay, I'll take it, but I'll swap those pickups in, and maybe that'll work." Few cats. Anyway, I don't want to beat that dead horse. You guys understand where I'm going. Seamus O'Brien, even if there was a difference, and there's not, you couldn't tell the difference through a FX board, loud amp, a drummer, a bass player, and a pub full of people. That's right, man. Be more concerned about the music. It's ridiculous. We're not listening to these things. We're not in a test environment. We're dealing in a real life situation where the acoustics of a room can play a part in the way that amp sounds, by the way. So that lets you know that that has a big part with the way the guitar sounds because it's going through the amp. So therefore, that your acoustics would be a next something would be interested would be a far more interesting thing to invest in than an African mahogany from the 1800s shipwreck of Captain Hook guitar. What? I didn't know if I was going to finish that one, but I made it to the end. I crack myself up sometimes. Um, yeah, it's not going to make a difference. I'm sure Dan Electric appreciated that too. Yeah, those things are made of particle board. Did that make a difference to Jimmy Page when he recorded Kashmir on Dan Electro? I don't think so. Well, it was the sound of those Dan Electro lipstick pickups. You know. So there's that, ladies and gentlemen. Now I have an album. I have two albums for sale on Bandcamp. Asanoki 1 and Asanoki Ants in the Pantry. I recorded those albums over the course of a little bit of time. The first album, Asanoki 1, I recorded in 3 months. The second one, it took 3 years because I moved from Singapore. I was in the middle of recording it when I was in the middle of moving when I was recording it. And so, yeah, there was a little bit of a gap, but they're both excellent. They're bookends. And if you want to support this channel, go to bandcamp.com, type in Asanoki, and look up those two records produced by myself, Mike McWilliams, and buy a single or buy the album. At the very least, take a listen to them. And that's how you support this channel. If you're really interested in supporting this channel, that's the way that you can do it. In return, you're getting great music again for your hard earned money. And that money is reinvested right into this channel again. And for cool things like the new lights I've got, it's so nice. I can I can finally I've got multiple lights going here and wireless cameras. And this all comes about because of the support that I get from you as a community. Plus, you can hear that I practice what I preach when you listen to those albums and hear that I used pretty common gear, some uncommon, but there are Harley Bentons in those records. There's Gibsons, there's Fenders, there's cheap amps, there's expensive amps, and it all sounds cohesive. Again, the reason it sounds cohesive, and you wouldn't say, well, that one sounded a little bit cheaper sounding recording equipment than this one. No, because it came down to these right here. It didn't really matter whether I was using expensive gear or not. And that's why in the real world, with me recording and making albums, this is my fifth and sixth album, by the way. The other four are available on iTunes for the time being. I'm going to extricate myself from my CD Baby distributor and distribute them myself. I'm sorry, well, to start distributing them solely through Bandcamp as well, the first four. But those are done under my name, Mike McWilliams. Williams. You can find that music on iTunes or Spotify. These two albums, however, Asanoki, are really recorded to support this channel. I recorded them with the thought of making music that I could then uh, offer to you as a means of supporting this channel directly. So if you feel so inclined to do so, again, go to bandcamp.com, type in Asanoki, and support us by buying the Asanoki 1 or 2 album. It would be greatly appreciated. Seamus O'Brien will pick up an album on Bandcamp. Mike Seamus, God bless you, man. My money isn't hard earned. I sell tone wood. Okay, we have got to stop with these metaphors tonight. Okay, we've done it for an hour or so now. It never gets old, though. I appreciate you doing so. And even just taking the time to listen, I think you'll like it. There's something for everybody there. It's my passion. My love is rock music in all its different forms and shapes. And so that's what those albums are about. But it wasn't a metaphor. Then you're like my business partner in Japan, the guy that I buy things with. His main job is actually selling wood, selling hardwoods for furniture. So yeah, he's a wood guy as well, and I like that because again, you know, he when these guitars come through, he has an eye for it. You know, he knows the woods that are involved. He's like, oh, because he knows nothing about guitars. It's the fact that he's never dealt with guitars before. I'm kind of his sensei in that regard, his teacher. But he knows wood, so that's a handy kind of knowledge to have around. All right, guys. I think that I have touched upon that subject in a different way. So I didn't want to make it a YouTube echo chamber kind of discussion. I really wanted to look at it logically and kind of tear it apart on its own merits. And you cannot convince me that tone wood makes a difference. Pickups make a difference. Now, that's a whole other discussion regarding pickups. We'll get into that another time. Thank you guys for joining in on the discussion and for supporting this channel with your time. If you're watching this in the rerun, I'd like to hear your comments down below. Please, your comments are very important. I can't stress to you guys how important your likes, which I appreciate you guys giving me tonight. The math is good on those, as well as your comments down below, because those are the things that I use to base a lot of these discussions that I have on these live streams. Or you'll say something to me, or you'll point something out to me, and I'll take it and I'll run with it. And so I love to hear from you for that purpose. Not just that alone, but I'd love to hear from you as well. So please do that as well if you can. Guys, be safe. Have a good week. Mondays always suck. Tomorrow is no exception. But please have a safe one. And I will see you again this Wednesday. Mickey, you're here. Sorry I missed the show. Been to see Ugly Kid Joe tonight. Don't worry about it, man. Catch it in the rerun. And at least you popped in. And God bless, man. I'm glad you made it back home safe. All right, guys, you take care. I'll see you around.